Well, good morning. It's 10 o'clock, so we'll get this going. Welcome and thank you for joining us. We'll have a Q&A after the presentation, so if you do have questions, you can type them into the box on the right of the screen as we go. So I'm Chris Haig. I am the Chief Information Security Officer for Mercury IT. So I'm going to be running through this presentation, just a few points and tips to keep you safer while you're working from home. So we'll move straight onto the slide deck. Thanks, Haley. So just in the agenda here, we can see we've got some 7 points that I'm going to run through. And we'll be sending these points out to you as well to help you set up. So point 1, you'll see that we've got some Windows updates and application updates that we're going to talk about. Point 2, we're going to talk about keeping your antivirus up to date. 3, personal favorite of mine, which is passwords, and we'll talk about passwords and password managers. Next, we'll talk about phishing. So probably one of the biggest issues we're having at the moment. So we've titled that Think Before You Click. We have multi-factor authentication. We'll talk about what that is, where you switch it on. We'll talk about DNS protection and how to secure your home network, which is often overlooked. Right, so firstly, Windows updates. Now, I bring this up because a lot of the time when machines get hacked, so to speak, or you get a piece of malware on it that's going to encrypt your files or things like that, essentially what's happening is a criminal is using a problem that is sitting on your machine. Now, that problem exists in pretty much all software. And the reason for that is software is very, very complex. So quite often you've got thousands of programmers working on something with millions of lines of code. So there's going to be issues there. They can't catch all of them. So as they find those issues, they release updates. So when these updates come out, generally on a weekly basis, you should really be doing these updates. A lot of the time they have security issues that they're trying to resolve, and that's what you need to update. So when Windows or your Mac pops up and goes, hey, you need to do this update, try not to avoid it when it pops up. I know we're all busy and we're trying to do something. It's probably best to save your work at that point, do the update, and then carry on. Now, the other important point is it's not just your operating system like Windows or your Mac OS that needs to be updated. Look at the applications you're running, specifically your browsers. So if you're looking at stuff like Chrome, Firefox, any of those that you're using, make sure that you clicking on the About button and make sure to check for updates and make sure you're running the latest updates. Some of the applications, just think about what you're using. Adobe Acrobat Reader is another good example that often has security flaws and is often used as a way for a criminal to actually hack into your machine. So have a look at it, make sure you're updating those applications, especially the critical ones you use every day. Next, we're going to talk about antivirus. Now, if you are running Windows 10, you probably have Windows Defender on already, but it's always best to check and it's being updated. If you click on the little search bar at the bottom left and you just type Defender and hit enter, it will take you to the settings. Just make sure that you've basically got green ticks and it says that the firewall is switched on for like your public and your other profiles. Like I said, it probably will be, but it's best to double check. There are some software and some malicious software that can actually switch that off. So double check it. If you're using other software, so other antivirus software, whether it's Sophos, Symantec, whatever it is, just go and open it. Make sure you're checking for updates and that it's getting regular updates as well. And like I said, one of my personal favorites, passwords, we need to talk about. Right, look, passwords are here for a little while longer, so we do need to make sure we're managing it very carefully. A good quote I saw on a website was, treat it like your toothbrush. Use a good one, change it regularly, and don't share it. Good advice for toothbrushes as well as passwords. Now, I've mentioned there, don't use the same password across multiple sites. It's a habit that a lot of people have because it's easier. Or you'll use a kind of a root password that you normally use, and then you'll adjust a few letters or numbers at the end for different websites. So you'll have whatever your password is, and it's like you put FB on the end for Facebook, or IG for Instagram, or that kind of thing. Unfortunately, criminals know that, so they do quick searches and just change the end bits a little bit to see if they can actually hack into other platforms. So they often call that credential stuffing, where they've managed to grab a password that you've used off a website because that website's been hacked. So they have your username and password, but then they use that username and password on other sites. So let's say Instagram got hacked. Then they will try that on Facebook, and they'll try it on your LinkedIn, and they'll try that on your Microsoft 365, etc. And if you've used the same password, all of a sudden they've got most of your accounts hacked. So make sure you're using different passwords. Now, I've mentioned there as well, 14 characters in length is a decent length. Anything less than that, they're starting to brute force that password really quickly. Now, I know that sounds like a long password to remember, but you should be using something called a passphrase. In other words, it's a phrase that's easy for you to remember, but because it's a phrase, it's longer, and it makes it way more difficult to actually hack, or what they call brute forcing. Now, the last thing I do need to mention about this, though, is it would be impossible for you to remember such a long passphrase that's different for all the different services and websites that you use. The average Australian, it's over 100 passwords is the average number of passwords you'd need to use and remember. So I don't think many people's memory is good enough for that. So use a password manager. Most of the time, password managers are free. You do get paid for versions if you want to use it for business, or you want to use it to share with your family and things like that. But some really good ones out there, LastPass and 1Password. I've used both of them for many years. I just switched from one to the other, so 6 years or so on both. So they're both awesome, and they actually fill the passwords in on websites automatically for you. So technically, you don't need to know the password. Here's a screenshot of a couple of examples, like where you use LastPass, and all you do is you just click in the box and you click on, whether it's Facebook or it's your credit card or whatever it is, and it actually just fills the details in for you. You'll also notice that last picture on the right of the screen there is to automatically create a password. Now, the one thing I would say that you see the password length is sitting on 12. You might as well pull that slider all the way across, and I think it goes up to 99 or 100 characters. Most websites will accept any length password, but there are some that are still restricted. So that's why it's got the slider, so you can make it a bit smaller if you need to. But generally, if you don't have to remember the password, make it as long as possible, because it really doesn't matter. Next, we need to talk about phishing. Now, that's phishing with a PH. I think most people have heard the term now because it's come up so much in the news. But if not, basically, these are email scams, or what they refer to as like business email compromise. It's when a bad actor, let's say, essentially sends an email and it pretends to be from somewhere else, something that you trust generally, and you click on it and it will normally ask you for your credentials. So once your username and password for whatever service you think it is, but they're pretending it is, and then you put your username and password in, they now have your username and password for whatever service you thought they were pretending to be. So some examples of that, 0365 is a very, very common one. So you might get an email that looks like it's from Microsoft, and it might say something along the lines of, hey, your space on your mailbox is running out. Click this link and we'll run through some things to fix that for you. So you go, oh, I'm running out of space, I need to fix this. And you click on the link and you put your details in to log into 0365, but it's not. So you'll probably find that that page either just closes or it redirects you to like a Google page, and you're like, oh, what happened there? Okay, what happened there is your credentials got stolen. So what we need to do is we need to get way better at actually identifying these phishing attacks, these scams that are coming in. There's some very, very good resources out on the web that can actually show you examples. We have some examples here that are coming out lately because of COVID-19. And note, it's not just that it's COVID-19 and it's a pandemic. This happens generally when there's any kind of bad news or disaster. So where we had floods, fire, etc., the scams will go immediately around that, because it kind of tugs at people's heartstrings, or hey, donate on this, or whatever it is. You need to be very, very careful. There are obviously valid organizations that are raising money, etc., but you need to check that you are going to the right one. You'll notice the example in the middle, there's actually a text-based message. Pretty scary as well, because it looks like it's information from the government, in this case obviously Australian government, and you're clicking on that link and it could actually compromise your phone as well. So we do need to be very, very careful with this sort of stuff. Now, if you're working from home and that, or from the office if you need to, if you just go into Google search bar and actually just type phishing quiz, like I said, that's with a PH, phishing quiz, you'll notice there's quite a few examples from various companies, including Google themselves, which was actually quite a good one, I thought. So I think it's like phishing.withgoogle.com. But anyway, Google it, just go phishing quiz, and there's various quizzes. So it actually runs you through examples and gets you to click whether you think it's a scam or not. So it actually starts to train you what is good and what's not good. So very, very clever resource. Check that out. Next, I want to talk about multi-factor authentication. Now, firstly, let me just talk about what it is. So it's sometimes called two-factor authentication, but more often multi-factor authentication. They are the same thing. What this is, it's where you need an extra factor to log in. So you put your username and password in, and it then prompts you like for a code. So quite often that will be from a mobile phone, like you can see in the picture there, where I can click, yes, this was me trying to log in, or I have to copy the code on the screen into the screen to log in. Now, the reason why this is very good is, let's say you have been phished and a hacker has got your username and password for O365, but you've got two-factor authentication switched on, or multi-factor authentication switched on. So they put the username and password in that they've stolen from you, and you get the prompt on your phone going, are you trying to log in? So at that point, you can click on the red button that says no, and it will deny access to that hacker. Also, it gives you an indication that someone's tried to log in with your details. And in most cases, they've got your actual username and password. So that should prompt you to then go and change your username and password for that particular service. So for all services that have multi-factor authentication as an option to switch on, go and switch it on. Facebook has it, LinkedIn has it, Xero, O365, lots of them have it. Go switch it on, because it can actually protect you. Now, the other one I wanted to talk about was DNS, or domain name system. Now, when we're working from home, particularly, we don't often have the same protections that a larger organization that's spending money on security to actually protect their assets. We don't have that at home. So we need to look at other ways of actually trying to protect us. Now, domain name system is essentially when you type in the URL bar, like www.google.com, right? The computer has to work out what that name relates to as an actual address on the internet, right? So to do that, it goes to an authority name source, a DNS server, and says, hey, I'm trying to connect to this google.com. What's its address? That server will actually reply back going, here's the address, an IP address typically, and then your machine knows how to connect to it and then shows you the web page. So what we do here with DNS protection is we actually put a barrier in between. So instead of just using the name servers on the internet or your service provider, we're going to actually change it and point to something like Quad 9. So what happens is your request for www.badsite.com hits the Quad 9 servers. They actually check a quick list of malicious sites, so known malicious sites, and goes, oh, that's a bad one, and sends back a page going, you don't want to connect there. We've blocked that. Your machine will actually get hacked if you go there. So that actually provides extra protection for you. Now, from a business perspective, you'll probably run something like Cisco Umbrella. It used to be called OpenDNS. And Cisco Umbrella allows for a lot more analytics. I can actually run reports to actually see what applications are running on my network. I can block certain applications. I can whitelist certain applications. and it gives me an indication of how the business is running and what the risk factor is. So it's a lot more than the Quad 9 thing. The Quad 9 thing is for like home use. It's completely free. It's really easy to set up and provides you loads of protection straight out at no cost. And lastly, I want to talk about your home network. Because a lot of us are working from home, so we've got to make sure that we're doing the right thing on our home networks. Quite often we are generally lazy. The service provider will send you the modem to connect to the NBN or whatever. You'll plug it in and you'll connect and you'll start working. So there's no thought given there to, there's a default password on that particular device. So you should change that from the default. So if you've not looked at that before, go and have a look at the device. It will probably give you information on how you connect to it. Normally you connect via a web browser. You'll log in with the default credentials that are probably still a label attached to the device. Or you can look it up, like you'll go, what's the default credentials for my Netgear or my whatever that I'm running? And it will go, it's admin or whatever it is. Go in there, go to the passwords, change the default password, very important. While you are in there, you'll see it like there's probably tabs or something like that. It's all like a graphical interface. It's pretty easy to work through. Go to the firewall settings and make sure that that's actually switched on for you. Now, I know a lot of people don't want to make changes to their devices because they're like, well, I'm not a network engineer. I don't know about it. I'm going to break it. Yes, you could break it, but please remember everything's reversible. It's not going to be permanently broken. You can test it out. Don't go change everything though. Like I said, just check that your firewall's on, change the default password. While we're on it, make sure you're securing your Wi-Fi. So quite often these devices are together, they're probably providing the internet and they're doing the Wi-Fi for you as well. Change your default Wi-Fi password. Use the password principles that I spoke about earlier. Make sure it's nice and long, so it's not easily hackable. And they'll make sure that you're protecting your home network. Otherwise, that's about it, the quick tips there. So we'll move on to any Q&A. If there is any questions, let's have a look at some of those. All right. See here, there is one where it says multi-factor authentication overseas can be difficult, and if there's any hints on that. Yeah, I do agree, it can be. It's whether you've got roaming on or not. When it's sending via SMS as a code, it's probably not the best multi-factor authentication. If you have an option to change it to something like a push authentication, that's way better, because what that's doing is actually just using internet connectivity. So hopefully your phone is on for roaming and you have internet connectivity, and then it will actually pop through a prompt for you to just click, yes, this is me, or no, it's not, as opposed to an actual message coming through on the phone. So that's one. Any thoughts on the Avast secure browser? I've not used that, unfortunately. So no, not too many thoughts. I'd have to go. I know of Avast. They're huge. They've won awards before as a good antivirus publisher. So it's probably a good thing to use. I don't know what drawbacks that has though as a secure browser. Sometimes when they secure things, they'll block cookies and various other things from running, which you can do in Firefox and other things as well. But sometimes it tends to break things. So sometimes you'll need to allow cookies for certain websites to work properly. So you'll have to give it a test and see. Alrighty, I think that's it on the questions. So we'll close this out. So I just want to say thank you everybody for attending today. We will send out these notes as well, these tips as a guide, so you can figure some of this stuff up yourself. Please see our Mercury IT website for our future events coming up. So upcoming events in May, and we have various other topics that we would love to share with you as well. So thank you and stay safe.